Alrighty, welcome back to part 3 of the Eugene Kids Daily Story Time. Today we have 2 books. They're a little bit longer, so we're not going to do 3 today. One of them is Little Blue Truck Leads the Way. It's a good one. And The Napping House by Audrey Wood and Don Wood. So let's get started. Thanks for joining. All right, up first, Little Blue Truck Leads the Way. Horn went beep, engine purred, friendliest sounds you've ever heard. So we got the little blue truck right there. About to head into the city. Some skunks. Little blue truck rolled into the city. Beep, beep, beep. Isn't it pretty? So he's heading into the city here. There's the little blue truck. Towering buildings scraped the sky. Beep, said Blue. This city is high. Kind of like New York City. Lots of buildings. People inside. Zoom, roared the trucks down the avenue. This city is fast, said Little Blue. Shove on, Shorty, yelled a double-decker bus with big red letters, Rides Are Us. You can see there. Double-decker bus coming in hot to Little Blue Truck. A grocery truck gave his horn a blast. Move it, bud. I'm first, you're last. See the grocery truck coming in there. Very stressful driving in the city. Wee-oo, went a siren. Coming through, busy police car, things to do. Police car there. Swish, swash, swoosh, went a big street sweeper, hollering, hey, better move, little beeper. Got the street cleaner. Make way, yelled the limousine, the longest car you've ever seen. I've got his honor, the mayor, inside. It's important, move aside. Cars and trucks were all in a tangle. Everyone started to shout and wrangle. Got a lot of traffic there. Up roared a taxi. Screech went the brakes. Stop, yelled Blue, for goodness sakes. You might be fast and I might be slow, but one at a time is the way to go. The voice of reason, the little blue truck, saying, everyone, pump your brakes, literally. Me first, said the limo, all puffed with pride. Then he gave a cough, and his engine died. He was stuck right there with the mayor inside. Beep, said Blue. Would you like a ride? See the smoke coming out of the limo? There's the mayor. Everybody watching gave a shout when the door swung open and the mayor stepped out. Hey, Mr. Mayor. His honor climbed up right on Blue and gave a speech the way mayors do. My friends, he said, what wonderful luck, this good advice from a little blue truck. One at a time is what we'll do, so single file, folks, follow Blue. Trucks and buses got in a line with vans and taxis, and it all went fine. A taxi let a van go past. The double-decker bus said, I'll go last. A little bit of order there. A marching band joined the big parade. Boom went the drums, and the trumpets played. They rolled along the avenue, and everybody waved to Little Blue. Look at that. Somebody's got a sign that says, Blue is cool. I love it. I love it. They clapped their hands and yelled, hooray, for the little blue truck who led the way. The end. All right, so slow and steady wins the race. Don't be mean. And here's Little Blue Truck leaving town. Getting out of here. Getting out of Dodge. Little Blue Truck. There's a bunch of these. They have like Little Blue Truck Halloween, all sorts of Little Blue Truck adventures with nice rhyming. The Napping House by Audrey Wood and Don Wood. It's a fun one. Wow, this came out in 1984. There is a house, a napping house, where everyone is sleeping. It's raining out. Dark and rainy. Good time to take a nap. And in that house, there is a bed, a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. See the bed there. And on that bed, there is a granny, a snoring granny, on a cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And on that granny, there is a child, a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And on that child, there is a dog, a dozing dog, on a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. Got a cat in the corner there. I think the cat's coming in next. And on that dog, there is a cat, a snoozing cat, on a dozing dog, on a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. Getting quite the pile there, people. Everyone looks pretty comfortable. And on that cat, there is a mouse, a slumbering mouse, on a snoozing cat, on a dozing dog, on a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. You can see the little mouse right on top of the cat. And on that mouse, there is a flea. Can it be a wakeful flea? On a slumbering mouse, on a snoozing cat, on a dozing dog, on a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. There's a little flea right on top of the mouse. Who's awake, not sleeping. A wakeful flea who bites the mouse. There it is. It just got bit. Who scares the cat. Ooh. Who claws the dog. Oh boy. Who thumps the child. Oh boy, this is getting out of control. Who bumps the granny. That's William. Oh boy. Who breaks the bed. Oh boy. In a napping house where no one now is sleeping. That's a little rainbow coming down there. Daylight. Napping house. Well, that concludes our toddler story time. If you want to stick around, we're going to crack into, I think, chapter 3 of Harry Potter is what we're on. Let's see, 31. Yeah, we'll do chapter 3, Letters from No One. Perfect. I think the last chapter, they went to the zoo and the glass to the snake exhibit disappeared. And it scared Dudley and his friend. Let's move on to chapter 3, Letters from No One. It's got one little illustration there. Lots of letters coming out of a fireplace. Here we go. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of the cupboard again, the summer holidays had started and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and, first time out on his racing bike, knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. I think she was the cat lady. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. This is why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted at Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Piers Polkiss was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public high school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuffed people's heads down the toilet the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick. Then he ran before Dudley could work out what he just said. One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his Smeltings uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Figg's. Mrs. Figg's wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate that tasted as though it had been there for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smeltings boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobbly sticks, used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later in life. As he looked at Dudley in his new knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears, and she couldn't believe that it was her ickle Duddykins. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought two of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in gray water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. "Oh," he said, "I didn't realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things gray for you. It'll just look like everyone else's when I've finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High, like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and a flap of letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail. 3 things lay on the doormat. A postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was vacationing on the Isle of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twanging like a gigantic elastic band. No one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he never even got rude notes asking for books back. Yet here it was, a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of a yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. "Hurry up, boy," shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing, checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back into the kitchen, still staring at the letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ain't a funny Dad," said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was on the point of unfolding the letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights, and it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the grayish white of old porridge. "Petunia!" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. "Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the same room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read the letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously. "As it's mine?" "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside the envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," said Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching, spying, might be following us," muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want—" Harry couldn't see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes. Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yeah, that's best. We won't do anything." "But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him that we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence!" yelled Uncle Vernon, and had a couple spiders fall from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths, then forced his face into a smile, which looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking, you're really getting a little too big for it. We might think it'd be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. "Take this stuff upstairs now." The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, and one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all of his toys and things that wouldn't fit in his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to his room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old video camera was lying on top of a small, working tank Dudley had once driven over the next-door neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first-ever television set, which he put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage, which he once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for an air rifle, which was up on the shelf at the end bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they had never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling at his mother. I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out. Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday, he had given anything to be up there. Today, he'd rather be back in the cupboard with that letter than up here without it. Next morning at breakfast, everything was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He screamed, whacked his father with the smelting stick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about the time yesterday and bitterly wishing he opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the mail arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with the smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting in which everyone got hit by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard. Your bedroom," he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley, just go. Just go." Harry walked round and round in his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of the cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received the first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again, and this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly, dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall to the front door. Wah! Harry leapt into the air. He'd trodden on something big and squashy on the doormat, something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big, squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for half an hour and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen, and by the time he got back, the mail had arrived. Right in Uncle Vernon's lap, Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. "I want," he began. But Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go into work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "if they can't deliver them, they'll just give up." "I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock a nail with a piece of fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just bought him. On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry, and they couldn't go through the mail slot. They had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and even a few forced through the small window in the downstairs bathroom. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could go out. He hummed Tiptoe Through the Tulips as he worked and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry had been found into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed to Aunt Petunia through the living room window. While Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy, trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in a food processor. "Who on earth wants to talk to you so badly?" Dudley said to Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table, looking tired and ill, but happy. "No post on Sundays," he reminded them cheerfully, as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. "No damn letters today." Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply in the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air, trying to catch one. "Out! Out!" Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the wall and the floor. "That does it," said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly, but pulling great tufts out of his mustache at the same time. "I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes. No arguments." He looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared to argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded-up doors and were in a car, speeding towards the highway. Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him around the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, VCR, and a computer in a sports bag. They drove and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction for a while. "Shake 'em off! Shake 'em off!" he would mutter whenever he did this. They didn't stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He had never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He missed 5 television programs he wanted to see, and he'd never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside of a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Harry shared a room with Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring out at the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast the next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to the table. "Excuse me, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? I've only got about 100 of these at the front desk." She held up a letter so they could read the green ink address. Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Railview Hotel, Cokeworth. Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The woman stared. "I'll take 'em," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her out of the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better if we just go home, dear?" Aunt Petunia suggested timidly, hours later, but Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in the car, and they went off again. The same thing happened in the middle of a plowed field, halfway across a suspension bridge, and at the top of a multi-level parking garage. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Petunia, dully late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great drops beat off the roof of the car. Dudley sniveled. "It's Monday," he told his mother. "The great Umberto's on tonight. I just want to stay somewhere with a television." Monday. This reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. Uncle Vernon was back and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package and didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked for what he bought. "Found the perfect place," he said. "Come on, everybody out." It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out at sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain. There was no television in there. "Storm forecast for tonight," said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hands together. "And this gentleman's kindly agreed to lend us his boat." A toothless old man ambling up to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowboat bobbing in the iron-gray water below them. "I've already got us some rations," said Uncle Vernon, "so all aboard." It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock, where Uncle Vernon was slipping and sliding, led the way to a broken-down house. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, the wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty chip bags just smoked and shriveled up. "Could do with some of those letters now, huh?" he said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver mail. Harry privately agreed, though that thought didn't cheer him up at all. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. Aunt Petunia found a few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. The storm raged more and more furiously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd been 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember it all, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although it might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back, he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slapping the hard rock like that? And with 2 minutes to go, what was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 9. Maybe he'd wake up Dudley just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The whole shack shivered, and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to get in. Bum, bum, bum. End of the chapter. What's going to happen next? Sneak preview there. Next chapter is called The Keeper of the Keys. So we'll pick that up tomorrow. And we will see you then.